Good evening, everybody, and welcome to SYP Ireland's first webinar of 2022. We are delighted to have you all tonight joining us, and we're thrilled to be joined by a wonderful panel of publishers from across Ireland who will be discussing their journey into publishing and how important location is to the stories that they tell. So we'd love to see what you think about what is being discussed. So we will have some time for Q&As at the end of the session. So get putting in your questions and anything using the Q&A function below. So without further ado, we are going to kick off with asking each of the panelists to give a brief introduction to themselves and speak a little bit about how they got to where they are, what they're doing at the moment in the publishing world in Ireland, and also giving us an introduction to their wonderful presses and how they came up with their company names, because I know there's some significance in there. So just to kick off for inclusivity, I am Jess, I am the chair of SYP Ireland. I have long blondish hair and I'm wearing a limey jumper at the moment. So welcome to our wonderful panelists, and I will kick off just with Kelly, if you'd like to go first and introduce yourself and what you're doing.
Yes, it's lovely to be here. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me along. I'm Kelly Creighton. My pronouns are she, her, and I have red hair and I'm wearing a beige cardigan. I started to write about almost a decade ago. And in 2014, I started up a literary journal that showcased the Irish short story, the contemporary Irish short story, and that was called The Incubator, which I was the founding editor of that for 5 years. It ran without any funding. And then whenever it got to be a little bit too much work, we had a couple of volunteers. Then I moved on to just kind of have that just once a year instead of quarterly. And since then I have edited a Christmas anthology, multi-genre anthology with a friend, a fellow writer called Claire Savage, and that was through Sasheda. And also since then I have set up Friday Press. Well, it's going on for 2 years with Friday Press. And that was really a way to get my stories, my books out there in the first place. And it is crime and thrillers set in Northern Ireland and abroad, actually, because I started to realize there was a real appetite for Irish stories in the States. And hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll have a few anthologies and it'll start to widen up and publish more people as well.
Perfect, thank you, Kelly. And where did Friday Press, the name, come from? Was it just a favourite day, or is there?
Yeah, I just thought it had good connotations, not so good. You know, with the Good Friday Agreement, I suppose, link there as well was quite significant. But it was really just writing out a lot of names and checking them off what didn't seem right, and that one stuck.
Which fit, yeah, and I think especially with the writing that you do yourself and what you publish at Friday Press, that makes a lot of sense in terms of location wise, which we can explore a little bit more depth in a minute. But thank you for your introduction. That's perfect, thank you. Paula, would you like to go next and introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, sure. So I'm Paula. I'm here on behalf of Sans.PRESS. As you said, for the descriptions, I've cropped brown hair, glasses, and a white knit jumper. And my pronouns are she, her. So yeah, I think what kind of got me into publishing, me and Sam, who was my partner and the editor for Sans.PRESS, we were just off our creative writing MA, and we were just in that lovely hub of literary community and working with it right when COVID hit. So right after being in that hub, we were kind of isolated from it. And we wanted to bring that connection back, and we wanted to get back into it and go back to reading lovely stories and discussing stories and being in that movement of it. So we started Sans.PRESS in our house right in 2020, like right when COVID hit. And since we've had 2 anthologies, we had Secret Lives in the first one, and because that's where your heart is. And what we kind of do is getting short stories that are connected by theme, that are connected by a visual call. So we want all the writers to be responding to an artistic prompt that kind of gets them together without limiting them into a too restrictive of a prompt. So this has been what we've been doing for the past 2 years now. We are working on our new anthology, The Last 5 Minutes of a Storm, this month. We just closed for submissions, so now we're in the lovely bit of reading stories and seeing where it takes us with the next book. But yeah, this has been kind of our proposal for the first books. Just looking at the questions you sent, my current role will be as a creative director for Sans.PRESS. So it's a bit of an editorial role with some graphic design. So I'm in charge of getting the visuals together with the selections that we do in the press.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Paula. That was really good. And it's nice to kind of hear that the next anthology, it's on its way. And I think it was recently, like last week, you took the last closed submissions for anthology.
Yeah, so we just finished last week, and we're just in the process of reading them and selecting the 15 that will be in the book.
So it's the nice kind of part where you get to go through and see everybody's hard work. Awesome. Perfect. Thank you very much. And Bridget, would you like to introduce your press as well and yourself?
Sure. My name is Bridget Farrell from Bullaun Press. Like Paula, I set up in the quite near the beginning of the pandemic, and the focus of the press is books in translation. That's the main thing. To go a bit backwards then, I suppose I got into publishing properly 6 or 7 years ago. I sort of came back into it from other things through editing and proofreading. I grew up as my father was a publisher, and he set up a press when I was small. So I actually never had any intention of having anything to do with publishing. And this is what I've ended up getting back into. It's called the Lilliput Press, and I work part-time with them also, production editor. I did an internship with them in 2017, so that got me interested in all the different aspects as well as the editing, which is just one small part, as we know. And Bullaun, yeah, it had been in my mind for a long time, but it just all came together. I'd moved from Dublin, and we were out here on small island. It's the largest of the Aran Islands, and I had a small baby, and yeah, it just had some headspace, I think, to finally bring it to light, the project. And sorry, my role, yeah, at the moment it's pretty much everything. I won't lie to you. Yeah, I mean, I have many collaborators, but yeah, I'm responsible for pretty much every aspect.
Perfect. I know I'm very jealous actually that you're based in the Aran Islands. I keep wanting to go and visit, and I'm just like, this is so cool.
It's
like,
beautiful. It's beautiful.
And
the name, I might come back to the name later because I could talk about that a bit more. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. We will pick that up then. But yes, so thank you for all of your introductions. So as you can tell, you're all focused on different areas of publishing and different kind of markets and different locations. So I'm kind of curious to see whether that decision has been born from a kind of passion, or if that is from seeing a gap in the market, or maybe a little bit of both. So Bridget, I'll start with you with translations. You started your press after obviously staying and moving to the Aran Islands. And I think in your own words, you describe it as wanting to build the home for translators, especially for Irish stories. So what inspired you to focus specifically on translations? And was that a case if you just didn't see anywhere kind of offering that service for translators to be based from?
Yeah, very much so. Sorry, freezing. The translators, there are lots of places that have obviously are producing translations. A lot of it's poetry, and I really felt that there needed to be a place for long form translation, and especially where Irish translators would have somewhere that they could come with long form translations. And sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. The immediate inspiration, I had been working with a brilliant translator on a book the previous year for the Bullaun Press, and he is a translator from Irish mainly. And that was just very inspiring to work with him. And that encouraged me to take the initiative to set up. I mean, my background is in languages. I studied several languages, and I've lived abroad a lot, and I read books in other languages. So for me, it was just a natural area to focus on. And yeah, I just couldn't believe no one else was doing it. So I waited, and I was like, no, somebody's going to set this up. And then I was like, nobody else is doing this, and it really needs to exist. So eventually I got around.
I suppose as well, by being based kind of in the Aran Islands, you have that, as you said, kind of that headspace to realize, oh, there is that kind of gap, but also that passion that you can kind of combine the two together. Do you think by being based out there instead of being based in Dublin, it kind of gave you more of inspiration to get started?
Definitely, yeah, I would definitely say that. I mean, it's such a beautiful place, and because of the pandemic, there were far fewer tourists than usual. So it was really very special, very quiet. And what I was going to say about the name earlier, so the word Bullaun, it's a type of stone, and it's often associated with magical properties. It's a naturally hollow stone that contains water. And the house we were living in was an old school teacher's house, and he was a bit of an antiquarian. This is like decades ago. And so there were these two big stones outside the front door that he'd had collected from other like religious sites on the island, because there were a lot of monks living here at one time. I mean, St. Enda was in the 5th century, and he had a lot of followers. And you know, they obviously came here because they felt it was a very holy place. It was so beautiful. And I suppose then I made associations between the monks and the work they were doing, which would have involved a lot of transcribing and a certain amount of translating. And for me, the Bullaun stone, it was sort of, I love the word as well, but it was also a way of connecting back with that tradition. And I mean, in Ireland, we have like a long tradition of translation. I don't know if you know the writer Ronan Sheehan. He's also a translator, and actually not so long ago he edited an anthology of Cuban poetry translated by Irish writers.
Wow.
It was Cassandra Voices published that. They're a magazine, a journal. And there was a lovely interview I read with him where he said that the first translation of Virgil's Aeneid from Latin into a vernacular language was apparently by an Irish bard in the 13th century. So a fun
fact. I like that a lot.
So anyway, it's just, I suppose it's just a way of saying that, yeah, we have a long tradition of translation in the country, and it seemed really appropriate to start with a book from the Irish, because it's a way of exploring our dual language heritage. So before going translating books from other languages, Irish seemed a natural starting point. And then obviously there's a lot of Irish being spoken here. So again, a lot of connections.
Yeah, it's like you've got all of the history and the geography and kind of a passion all built into one place. So yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. Kelly, I'll come to you as well then. So you are publishing stories based, as you said, kind of within Northern Ireland, and specifically, I think East Belfast. Your detective series, the D.I. Sloane ones, are all around that kind of area, and take real inspiration from like the places, which obviously has a lot of history attached to it. What inspired you to kind of focus on East Belfast, or just kind of Northern Ireland, I guess, as a place, both as a writer and as a publisher of your own work. And what do you think the appeal of what's the Belfast noir kind of fiction is to a wider audience?
Yeah. Well, whenever I started to write the D.I. Sloan books, it started off as a short story. And I think I'm based in Newtownards, but I was born in Belfast. And obviously before COVID, every week, a couple of times a week, I would be going through East Belfast to go to a literary event around Botanic area, or, you know, at the Crescent Arts Centre. So I think I was going through there and seeing, you know, it had been such a gritty place, and I'd spent quite a lot of Saturdays as well. You know, my dad had a business there for a while, and so I would go and spend my Saturdays there. So I kind of knew the place. It had this grittiness, and now it's been all kind of rejuvenated in a very artsy way. There's the East Side Visitor Centre. There's lots of great places that are cropping up, and it just has this different feel to it. But these two kind of senses very juxtaposed, you know, with the sectarian murals, and they're kind of, I think it says that in the first book, The Sleeping Season, you know, it's like a hippie lady, you know, it's all very kind of artsy, and, you know, she's in her garden, there's a little allotment. So it was really somewhere that it drew me to it. And what I'd written before were very working class characters, and that's a working class area, but I was interested in bringing a detective who comes from more of a middle class background, and, you know, putting her in that area, and in a fictional Strandtown police station there. So that was kind of the inspiration for the area. I just find it a very interesting place. And I know that James Murphy, a local crime writer, he was doing a similar for West Belfast, so I thought it was nice to go to that area. And of course there's lots of inspirational people from the East as well. So that was really how that started. And like Bridget and Paula, you know, SYP Press and bringing out the first book happened in 2020. So all kind of pandemic projects, I suppose. Whenever it came out on the 27th of March, you know, we missed having a public launch, so everything moved to Zoom. But as far as you know, a wider audience, I noticed with The Bones of It as well, which is my novel that came out in 2015. And it was set in a seaside town, and it was very much about, you know, post Good Friday Agreement and masculinity. And there was a professor that got in contact with me to say that they wanted to study it on their political violence course, and he was in Atlanta, Georgia. So, you know, I started to see that there was an interest. And also Lorraine Berry, who writes for the LA Times, wrote an article about Belfast Noir, and she picked up on the D.I. Sloan series as well, which was fabulous. And I don't know, like I went with Sharon Dempsey, who's also a crime writer. We went November 2019 to Boston Book Festival to talk about Emerald Noir, and, you know, the room was packed. It was like, you know, you would never get the same interest here, but there was just, I suppose Boston's very, you know, a lot of Irish descendants there too. So I just really realized that there was a real interest in Irish stories, and particularly crime in the States. So I suppose that is where I'm kind of seeing most of the sales from for the series at the minute.
And did that kind of encourage you kind of finding, I guess, that global audience for Belfast Noir to write and publish the new book that's set over there?
Yeah, well, that was 2018. I went there, so I suppose it was before I knew that really there was the interest. It's set in South Dakota, and I got an ACES award to go there and research that. And at that stage, I didn't really notice, but I'm just coming to kind of realize that, you know, the interest that I have in American stories, you know, is kind of reciprocated the other way. So yes, Friday Press was going to be just for that series, and then down the line, maybe, you know, an anthology or whatever. But yeah, I just thought, I don't know if I want to start again with something else, or I'm quite happy with the way everything's going at the minute. So I thought of it, just, it's, you know, stories from home and abroad, and bring that next book out through Friday Press as well.
Yeah, it's nice to kind of mix, and especially for Belfast, it's like experiencing such a kind of hub of creativity at the moment, like with the kind of the Belfast Noir, and with so many local writers and publishers kind of all coming together and having the East Side kind of creative hive. It's really nice to kind of see that kind of blossoming, especially from kind of places which maybe previously you wouldn't have thought there would be such interest that people would want to read about in a novel kind of fiction way.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then Paula, moving on to you. So Sans.PRESS, obviously you've said that you kind of focus more on anthologies and building a collection of stories. So your experience might be a little bit different from the others, because you are kind of getting stories from everywhere, and location maybe is less of a factor. Is that something that you have seen, that there is a broader type of story that you're getting as a submission, or is there still a kind of a sense of place and I guess Irishness in the stories?
We definitely do get like a particular interest from Irish writers because of our connections here. Like the fact that we're based in Limerick is very linked to the University of Limerick, and like all the support that we had from the creative writing course and the writers that are lecturers there. So Donna Ryan and Sarah Moore have been involved in like creating a literary community in Limerick, and we've been taking part of it for so long, and we kind of wanted to participate as well. So we do get a lot of international stories, and this would be my experience as well, like coming from Brazil to be a writer here. And when we were sharing stories in the course, I'd have my own very Brazilian stories happening, and seeing that there is a connection to the very Irish stories that people are writing here. So it's nice to see when you put the stories together, you obviously see the difference in setting and culture, but there is a level of experience that connects them. There is a sense of something happening in the background despite of, so we kind of go for that undercurrent that is always happening in stories, that you see the places and you get a real sense of a distinct experience, but they're all connected in some way to that very human core of what we're talking about. So this is something that we have a lot of fun with, to see all these coming together in the same book. And we've found that Limerick had that interest for international stories and for new projects coming in. So we didn't find that the market was interested only in Irish stories. There is a reception to all sorts of stories. So that was kind of what we were going for with and just being part of that that community that's bubbling here.
Yeah,
so,
no, definitely. And I think it's the themes of your stories, that you kind of said, like secrets and love and the heart and longing and desire and all of those emotions, which are such a universally applicable, but there's also that element of kind of place and specificity that can kind of pop up within anthologies and within stories which are kind of based around one element, I guess.
And there is that, this is obviously not my quote, but I forgot who said it, that like the more specific a story gets, the more universal it is. So we do, when you get an insight on a place and a culture, and it's still that human core there. So that's kind of what we love to see in stories.
Yeah, perfect. All right, perfect. I'll move on to the next question then. So location can cause some issues, especially with shipping and getting your name out there, especially when the publishing world can be a little bit kind of city-centric. Have any of you faced any challenges that you could maybe blame on where you're based? And has that forced you to react in different ways and be creative with how you're getting promoting yourselves and your presses? So Bridget, I will come to you first, because I'm sure that there may be some issues you faced being Ireland based?
Yeah, that's true. Actually, just today I was in touch with the printers because the first book is on the way as we speak. I'm actually having it printed in Poland. This was kind of a tough decision. I would love to have it printed in Ireland, but I really wanted it to look a particular way. It's a hardback, and I also really wanted to use FSC certified paper, you know, the Forest Steward Council, because it's just some kind of a mark of sustainably managed forests. I mean, it may not be the best scheme, but it's the one that all the big publishers use. So I was just trying to do that. But when I spoke to the Irish printers, it wasn't really possible with the quality of the book I wanted as well. So it's ending up coming from Poland, and the Polish printers are lovely. And I've been in touch with them a lot, but I was trying to explain that when you send something to the island, you just send it obviously to the island. Actually, on a side note, I got a Christmas card that just said Bridget Farrell, Aaron Moore. So it had gone to completely the wrong island, and then somebody had written on it, crossed it out and said try Aaron. So it did end up here. And my mother actually got a Christmas card that had gone all the way to the Cayman Islands before it got here. But anyway,
wow. Like nothing but respect for the postal service.
All the courier companies know that if something's coming here, they have to first deliver it to the docks in Galway, and that is a cargo company that will then bring it out here. The cargo boat comes twice a week. But when I was trying to explain this to the Polish printer, and then she was looking for a phone number, a contact number, so then I gave her the address of the docks in Galway. So then it got confusing because she thought she should give that number to the courier. So I don't know. Look, I hope the advanced copies will turn on. Just keep an eye out. Yeah.
We'll hold off. We'll cross our fingers for you. I'm sure it will all work out. But yes, location being
that's the big logistics one, I guess. And yeah, I remember. In fact, the day I went to pick up the advanced copies, I had some advanced copies printed before Christmas, and I had them printed just in Barna, which is just across the water. But it's still a whole day's trip to get there. And I went with my little boy, he's 1.5, and you know, when we got off the boat, like, it was the biggest hail shower you've ever seen in your life. Like, it was quite a dramatic journey that day, just even to pick up the 40 books. There you go.
Yeah, it's a logistical bit of a nightmare, but it will be worth it. I am absolutely sure. All right, thank you. Kelly, for you, how is location potentially a challenge?
Location is fine for me. Whenever I started writing and whenever I started the incubator, I had, my youngest was only a baby, and I was also carer for my eldest daughter. So I've always kind of been very internet based, you know, with everything. And that's why I wanted to have an online journal. Lots of people wanted a print copy, and they could get a print copy. And we also had the PDF, and tried to make it as accessible as possible. So we had lots of different formats to read it. But I wanted it to be there online, because that's whenever I was really getting into short stories and starting to go to creative writing classes, I was sitting up at nights and you know, looking at the online literary journals. So I think that has carried on, and especially trying to bring the first book out during a pandemic. You know, it has been difficult, but because I think I have all of my social media in place, all those different platforms, it really wasn't so bad. Whereas I assume, you know, it would be difficult if, you know, you were just relying on going and having different events in person. So I think for accessibility, and even nowadays, you know, I just hope that the literary festivals have some sort of a hybrid where some things stay online, because it's really making me see, like, the likes of, you know, Bridget, people who, you know, think different events aren't as accessible for as well, or people who are carers or have a disability, you know, I think, you know, having something online is really the way forward, and hopefully that stays.
Oh, absolutely. It's I think if one thing has kind of come out of the pandemic, which has been a, you know, kind of I guess a positive, has been the fact that it's been so accessible to look at like location in a different way and be able to you know, connect with people around the world and attend events rather than it having to be you know, a one-day trip to pick up the advanced copies, or you can kind of do everything a little bit more easily than just booking everything. You can just log on. So yeah, absolutely, I agree. Paula, what about you? Has location played any part or any challenge in getting the anthologies out there or promoting them?
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna be more apparent this year, because the last 2 years we were very much online. Like a lot of our presence and a lot of our, and even for our markets, people were definitely more interested in the ebooks and in the digital versions of the books. Because what ended up happening with us is that to avoid upfront costs, we were using on demand. And then that's great for getting international shipping and to being accessible to people in other countries. But then it became really expensive to ship to Ireland. So there's that sense of like, this should be very easy for somebody in Ireland to get. So we're trying to move our production back into Ireland and like redistribute from Limerick. We're doing that on a smaller scale now to really be based here with the print books and trying to bring print a little bit more to the center of what we do, rather than focusing on the ebooks. And we're focusing that a lot because we got Arts Council funding. So now we're allowed to invest a little bit in upfront costs and then try to redistribute from Limerick instead of working out of pocket. So we want to progressively move out of depending so much on demand and just leaving it as an option for international markets, and then trying to bring our Irish hub to Limerick. So from now we're doing it in initial steps, having a few books based in the house and selling through our website, but it is a process to try to get it centered here in Limerick. And I feel for distribution it'll be less of a challenge than for production, because we do have a few events going around in the area that would be accessible for us to also go to. So we're trying to keep the balance of those two things.
Yeah, it's kind of finding, I guess, what works and how much you can kind of keep under your control and how much you can kind of branch out and see how everything is, and you know, hopefully many more anthologies to come, so you'll perfect the process by the end of it. Okay, perfect. I will go on to the next question then. So I think, Bridget, you said, you know, storytelling is a huge part of culture here. And, you know, there's a huge amount of history and tradition that comes with telling stories, especially in all of your cases, bringing kind of new voices to life and highlighting place and themes that are maybe more relevant in certain places than in others. So do you think that is something that is made more possible because you are independently, you know, running your presses, or is that something that you think is just what it is like in Ireland? Bridget, I will come back to you first. How do you feel about that?
Sorry, just rephrase it slightly, the question.
Oh, okay. So obviously, just in terms of kind of storytelling being a tradition, how do you feel like that would be possible if you were part of a big corporate press, or do you think because you are independently run and based kind of where you are and have that more freedom, I guess, to represent who you would like to and pick the stories that you'd like to tell?
It's I mean, obviously the big firms, they have their commercial bottom line, and I mean, that's why we wouldn't see much fiction and translation being published, well, not by the bigger firms in Ireland anyway. And I mean, in the other English-speaking countries where you have several presses who are dedicated, or they focus on literature and translation, like England, Scotland, Wales, America, Australia, it tends to be the smaller independent presses that go for the fiction and translation, because it's that bit riskier. The market is obviously small. Like literary fiction is a niche market anyway, and you could say that translated literary fiction is, you know, a very minority sport. But you know, at the same time, it's one way we have, like, just opening up small windows of communication between cultures and between countries. I think it's important to be producing that here in Ireland. You know, we do pay attention to stories from other places. Like we have the Dublin Literary Award and the International Literary Festival. You know, we like to put the spotlight on literature and translation sometimes, but then, you know, we're not really doing it ourselves. So sorry, I seem to be going back to the rationale for why I set up.
No, I think that's it's honestly, it's a perfect answer, because it is that that sense of, you know, Irish publishing, like across everywhere, is very much that kind of finding your niche and finding kind of what you're interested in and presenting that to the world and bringing those stories to life, which I think is what all three of you are doing with your work and with the stories that you tell. So it's absolutely that kind of amalgamation of different things, which I think you're doing at Bullaun. Yeah, perfect. I will, Paula, I'll mix it up and I'll come to you. Do you think that by being independently run, you have kind of the more freedom to tell the stories that you'd like to?
Yeah, definitely. Like we get to chase our passions a little bit more, because we're aware that in a bigger publishing industry as well, there would be a long process involved in selecting a story that would include, is it marketable and is it going to profit as much? And with us being a very small operation with also small costs to run, we can kind of go after the things that we find interesting. And we do like having a little bit of weirdness that might be niche, and that might, to mix up some genre fiction with literary fiction as well. And just because we do think there's stuff that sometimes would be separated in a very specific niche that people in other niches would enjoy. So we kind of get to have fun with that, and we're allowed to put our values up front and just decide what we want to be promoting and what we want to be saying, and not having to respond either to a big chain to do it, or to how much it's going to sell, because we don't need that big of a headline. And we get the privilege as well of doing anonymous submissions, so we don't need to worry. We can promote new writers because we're just looking at the stories, so we don't need to justify it with their CV. We can just look at the stories, and then after we find out, have they published a bunch of very successful books before, or have they not? And it's kind of it's nice to have the privilege to be that space that can just look at the stories.
Yeah, to have that kind of freedom and make those choices. Yeah,
for us as well.
No, absolutely. And a little bit of weirdness is always good. So I very much appreciate that. Kelly, this is probably a bit different for you, obviously, with your publishing and your own stories. And I know you've kind of said might spin out into different things in the future, but for now it is focused very much on kind of your series. Is it something that you feel, because you are kind of independently run and a self-publisher, that there's any difference in that, or is it kind of, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think my first poetry collection, novel and short story collection were all traditionally published, and I had a couple of opportunities maybe, or times whenever I thought that the first Sloan book was going to be picked up by a press, and it wasn't because they were either having difficulties or they couldn't commit financially to a series. So I think that the interest, compared to way back whenever I started, and it seemed to be a real interest from publishers to go with crime series, but not really so much No, I think it's that financial commitment, and the debut just seems so new and shiny, and getting the next big thing, and agents want debut writers. So I think having that validation from a couple of publishers that they were almost going to publish it, I thought, well, it kind of made me think it's good enough then, hopefully. So I decided, to go with that. But I have been published by Irish independent publishers. I haven't had that experience of having one of the bigger ones, but I just find a lot of the times when I'm reading crime fiction at the minute, it's very much about the hook, and I'm quite disappointed once I get to the end of it. But because it seems to be all about the hook for grabbing a publisher, grabbing an agent, and I like something that kind of examines more about different social issues. So I know that's not every publisher's kind of thing. So yes, it gave me that freedom to explore the things I wanted to explore. And the same with with the incubator, or with the Christmas anthology that I did with Claire Savage. Having that very much, like Paula was saying, you don't know what people have published. I would say don't send us a bio until after. And it was just really lovely and refreshing, to get these different stories and see what people are writing, in different genres, or, the contemporary Irish short story, and being able to take those risks. It's very much about funding. And even whenever I had a short story collection out with a smaller publisher than my novel, and I felt quite relieved, because I thought it is a niche market and it might not sell very well, but I think they were still very sales driven, and it did quite really make me look at things differently. And I thought, do I want a bigger publisher? Because if that small publisher is very focused on sales, then there'll be more pressure maybe to write something I don't want to write as well. So yeah, I think that you can definitely take more risks and stick to what you want to see out there.
Yeah, definitely, and get that completely. I'm seeing that we are kind of coming into the Q&A session time, but I would just ask one more question, because I'm sure a lot of the audience who are joining us tonight will be listening to you, and will be people who are looking to maybe get into the industry or gain some skills in their jobs that they are looking either to get into or currently have. So what advice would all of you give somebody who's listening today about publishing, or setting up your own press, or gaining skills and looking for, I guess, your niche and following your passion? So Kelly, I'll go straight back to you.
Yeah, I think that starting up the incubator was a good thing to do for networking, to see what other people were writing, just to really learn about publishing from that point of view. I think I bit off more than I could chew. It was this massive quarterly journal, but keep it smaller, but I think it's definitely good to come up with a project and put yourself out there, and it's a good way to link in with other writers and other people in the publishing industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Bridget, what about you? What advice would you give to someone listening today?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that people working in publishing tend to be extremely helpful and collaborative. And I mean, events like these are absolutely fantastic. You're a very dynamic organization. I know that somebody I worked with in Lilliput, she's still the production manager, Ruth Hallinan. I think she has mentored some of your members, and I mean, that kind of that's invaluable, that kind of thing, because I learned so much from her. And people being generous with their time is, I'm not sure exactly how you link to the people, but once you are working with someone, or can get that opportunity, it's people are very willing to share what they know.
Yeah, and it's yes, very nice of you to mention the SYP mentorships. Ruth is very good on that, and it's something for the audience. It will be open for applications again this year, so keep an eye on.
No, really great scheme. Yeah.
So I just have to, I think they're still confirming a date, but keep an eye on our social media and we'll be able to announce it at some point soon. Paula, what about you? Just what advice would you give to anyone watching today?
Yeah, definitely what Bridget said, like to try to get into connections in social media and on the internet a lot. Like people are very generous with what they know, and the amount of information that I have found and like the amount of free resources that I have found that people just went through the time of posting it online to help somebody else. Yeah, if I if I can plug something, there's Small Fair coming up. That's a whole online event and it's all free for small presses. And there's going to be a lot of really small independent projects just talking about it and just sharing what they've learned in their processes. So definitely hit that up and get some information. And I guess just really going for stuff you're passionate about. Like it's a lot of work, so you should be really in love with it. So if you love really niche high fantasy short stories, go for really niche high fantasy short stories, because it's such a big commitment to do to something and to not chase the stuff that you're a little bit crazy about. So that's, yeah, kind of find your madness and go for it a little bit.
I love that. And I think that's one thing that, you know, all three of you have definitely shown. You know, you're all passionate about something and you have all chased that and have been very successful in doing so. So, I mean, again, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your stories. We've had a couple of questions come in, so I would just go through them while we still have a bit of time. So we have one question which has asked, could you walk us through a day in the life in your role? So what is the general ticks in your to-do list? Paula, I'll come to you on that first.
Yeah, so it would change a lot during the year. So because we're doing our submission call now. So I guess I'd start with just checking our inbox to respond to all the people who were asking for information about our submission calls. Do a little bit of reading from the stories we got. We have a tracker to fill that in, and we have twice every 2 weeks we have a meeting, so we kind of have like a scheduled amount of stories to read a day. Get that in, do my tracker notes so I can discuss with the rest of the team. Again, every week I take a day to do social media planning for the entire week, because I can't be doing social media every day. And yeah, so by the end of the week, we'd have a meeting, myself, our editor, Sam, and our assistant editor, Mark, and we'll discuss each story in our latest block, decide what's moving up to the long list. And once all that's done, then I'm going to be focusing on editing and formatting it. But the normal process would kind of, during submission periods, would be this, I guess. It's a lot at once, but that's, yeah.
No, it's good. And then it's good. Yes, you're planning ahead. So that's always helpful in busy periods. Bridget, what about you? Obviously, with the book kind of coming out soon and the advanced copies, what is the daily life looking like at the moment?
It's mainly nocturnal, I have to say. I don't have any days, because the days, I have a day job for some of the days where I have some childcare. So yes, everything came together at the beginning of this year. So everything from liaising with the printers, the cover designer, the website, the designer, the typesetter, the proofreader, Aisling from SYP did a great job. And publicity, I'm contacting all the media, and at the same time doing the annual arts grant funding application to the Arts Council, which would be very important towards securing funding for next year. Keeping an eye out for stuff to come, being in touch with agents and publishers. Yeah, I could go on and on.
It's a lot to tick off. No, perfect, thank you. And Kelly, what about you? What is the daily to-do list?
Yeah, it would be a lot of admin, maybe contacting bloggers for a blog tour, staying on top of social media, formatting, doing any training that I need to do for those kind of things, making YouTube videos or blogging myself. So it just really varies, or editing or getting in touch with the editor.
Yeah, it's a kind of I think that's the one thing that whenever you ask somebody in publishing or well, in many industries, that it's always just like, oh, well, on Monday I do this, and then on Thursday it's a completely different job that I'm doing, but still within the same realm of skills and focuses. So yes, we've got one more question in here, which I'll just squeeze in before we wrap up completely. And they're saying that they loved hearing about the ideas we've discussed around storytelling. And with the popularity of retelling mythology and folklore, do you think the novel as a form is resorting back to a tradition of telling stories that we see in historic literature, like the Arthurian romance and different things within that kind of theme? Who'd like to take a look at that question? Any takers? Okay, Paula, you go with you.
Yeah, there's it's kind of a complex one, but we did notice that a lot in the short stories as well, that there was this interest in retelling of folklore and in different from different folklores as well. So something that we find really interesting is that they appeared in different cultures in different ways, but you see that they're appealing to basic interests of human nature, not human experience would be a better. So it's kind of interesting to see how those things pop up and how they're kind of shorthand for interesting arcs. So even in more modern retelling, so you see zombies coming up as a shorthand for the collapse of civilization. And how does that look if you're looking at zombies in Brazil or in Ireland or in Eastern European retelling? So it is different approaches to that same idea of what if society collapses, what if or the Arthurian myth that he mentioned. So the idea of a hero, of that kind of arc, how does that play out? And how does it play out in our own culture across time? So the tropes and the themes that would be relevant a few years ago, maybe how do they apply to new ideas of identity and culture? So there's a lot of interest in gender in retelling as well, because they'd be really attached to traditional ideas of gender, and how do they play out now that we're interpreting gender in different ways and looking at it in different ways. So we kind of find that very invigorating, that idea of looking at the foundation of our culture through different lenses and see what we find. So I've kind of gone off, but that's something that it has been really interesting for us to look at.
No, I think that's absolutely fine. And I think as well with Sans.PRESS, I think on your mission is to kind of find stories that fascinate. And I think that in its sense of, you go back to stories that have been told, and you see the different themes that come through. So it's really interesting to kind of, when there is a theme that is going out there and what that represents about the world that we live in, and as the question says, is it kind of resorting back to retelling stories in different ways and adapting them to what we know now? So yeah, perfect. All right, I will we are getting to time, so I will wrap up here, but I just have to say thank you hugely to all of you for attending and for the panel. Obviously you've been amazing. We really appreciate your time this evening. So this webinar will be available to watch back on the SYP YouTube account. And as I said, you can keep updated with everything that's going on at SYP Ireland, be that the upcoming events, our book club and the mentorship program at SYP on Twitter and SYP Ireland for us. Our next event is our first book club of 2022, and we'll be discussing The Raptures by Jan Carson. So nice representation of a local author for myself and for Kelly. So very excited to discuss that, and we hope to see as many of you as possible there. So on that note then, I will thank you all again for joining us, and everyone have a lovely evening.